He's the man of the hour, the man with the power, too sweet to be sour, the reflection of perfection, the number one selection, the lady's pet, the man's regret, and what you haven't seen is better yet. He was a man that ate T-bone steaks, he lifted barbell plates, he was sweeter than a German chocolate shake. He was the man with the largest arms in professional wrestling. He had the look, he had the rap, he had the ability to draw people in as a heel world heavyweight champion and the New York Northeast Territory. He was able to sell out Madison Square Garden and get people to come back, and he got over. It was box office. He was making more money than he ever thought possible. And then it all came crashing down and it hurt inside when he lost the title and he saw that other wrestlers were able to take his stuff and take it to new heights. He was the man that was way ahead of his goddamn time, so influential. He was superstar Billy Graham. He was also a carny, he was also a liar, he was also a terrible father, a terrible husband. He abused his body, he decided to basically take up all his hate in the name of the Lord and throw it at people that used to be his friends because he wasn't getting the paychecks that he felt he deserved. For breaking the goddamn mold, he basically just decided to basically mold himself into a ball of fucking hate. Yeah, he's superstar Billy Graham. Here we go. I'm John Renton with my review, Dark Side of the Ring, the original superstar Billy Graham. That's right, folks. Even though I recognize the superstar Billy Graham, one of the most influential wrestlers of all time. Up there with Gorgeous George. Honestly, so influential. And I'm not going to knock every single damn thing, because there are a few things that I think could have possibly changed the trajectory of his career and life. But yeah, a true pioneer, and also just look at the various comments that he made later in his life, talking about various people who need to take steroids, even though he championed the dangers of steroids and stuff like that. Talking Heads, Dave Meltzer, makes sense. Jim Cornette, Steve Keirn, yes, Skinner, also one of the fabulous ones. John Arezzi, pro wrestling historian. Ken Patera, who really didn't get to say all that much in this. Probably because he had another McDonald's window to break, har har. Bill Anderson, family members. Was nice to hear from Valerie and the kids. All this old footage was so cool to see. Capella and Joseph, the son and daughter, or the daughter and son rather. He was more superstar than he was Wayne Coleman. That's who the man that played Superstar was, by the way. Joseph I felt really bad for because he felt very shunned. Superstar had it. That's the thing. He did have it. It's the uncoachable it. There's no disputing. Even looking back at this stuff, you can see why, even though people did hate him, they loved him. They loved to hate him, and it worked. He was making a ton of money. He wasn't polished, but he could talk. His work really always sucked. But he could talk, and he could bleed, and he could do some good stuff as far as like drawing people in. 1961, he was Teenage Mr. America in Arizona. He put concrete in coffee cans to work out. His dad was super abusive. I don't think they covered nearly as much of his early life, I think, as they could have. And yes, obviously, only 45 minutes with commercials, but still. He basically stood up to his dad finally when he was big enough to do that, and that's when that stopped. And he carried that with him. And look, no parent should ever do that to their child. I don't fucking care who you are. If you think about doing that to your goddamn kids and you're doing that to your kids, you're a fucking scumbag. No matter what it is. But he finally did the bodybuilding, did that stuff. Went to the CFL. That didn't really work. It kind of flamed out. Injuries and stuff like that. Because he was born in 1943. So he met Stu Hart. By the time he got into professional wrestling, he was 27. And back then, if you got into wrestling at age 27, I'm not saying you were a dinosaur, but a lot of people got in when they were about 19 or 20. So he was and he was training at 27. So that's Stu Hart. Steve Strong, who apparently was a former wrestler and a friend of, Billy Graham. It was nice to hear from him. I've never heard the name Steve Strong. If you know who he is, please tell me. Yes, there are people I don't know, believe it or not. The Graham brothers, they show a brief thing from Capitol Wrestling in 1958. This was so fucking cool. See, I love seeing deep cut footage like this. And Jerry Graham had flamed out completely. He was drinking a whole lot. This is well after he stole his mother's body and from the hospital and everything. Check out the Graham, the Graham Dynasty episode, Dark Side of the Ring, Breaking the Cycle. He saw that Billy had great potential. Billy was doing the televangelist, like preacher stuff. And, he was Wayne Coleman. He was working in Arizona. He wasn't really doing all that much. And he says, hey, how about you become my de facto brother? So obviously he will. And I think, if I'm right, Eddie and Mike Graham, their last name was Gossett, but still. Thankfully, Eddie Graham was able to parlay the Graham name into something more positive, because Jerry Graham really he was an alcoholic and he had a lot of issues. But they went to L.A. Jerry did not last, and Billy basically was able to stick around because he could talk, and taking this Billy Graham name, the televangelist, that was a piece of shit, by the way. And then again, most televangelists are. And he trained with Arnold Schwarzenegger. You got to be careful saying that last name. We know how Hogan would say it. And his Cadillac got vandalized. He could not pick up his wife and daughter, who had just had the daughter. And Arnold drove in his little bug and got him. And that was just hilarious. And yeah, you could see why they were, good training buddies. There was a telegram that the daughter found of, her mother announcing that her and, Wayne got married. That was really fucking cool. See, Capella, she was, I think, the highlight of this. I mean, even though Joseph was pretty good, she was the highlight. The mother was named Madeline. And I forgot that he actually had kids from a previous marriage. That was one thing I did forget about. He was a born preacher. He was born to spew that line of bullshit. Let me just say right now that while I knock religion and I stand by everything I say, there are a lot of people that do use it. Some people that I talk to that use those teachings, the storybook stuff, because that's all they are stories, to be a good person and to grow and help people and everything. And there's nothing wrong with that shit. That's not what Billy Graham did, though. He was perfect for wrestling because he was a carny. And the AWA footage, and the thing is, by the time he got to the AWA, it was what, 72? 72, 73? So he was already almost 30, because he was born in June of 1973. And they kind of glossed over the AWA stuff, because he was a big fucking deal there. I mean, it didn't last a ton of time, but he was in The Wrestler, that 1974 movie. Vince Sr. brought him in 1975, and the story had been told that he wanted somebody to beat Bruno. And that Bruno was in the second reign. He had held on to it for 8 years or so. 8.5 years, I think, the first time. It was in the midst of a 3.5 year run. But then was like, I want to lose this because I want to go home. So the idea is that, Billy Graham was going to win it on this date and lose it to Bob Backlund. Bob Backlund was handpicked. He was from Florida. He was in Florida. Steve Kern apparently is not a Bob Backlund fan because he just dumped on the fuck on Bob Backlund. Backlund's promos were never great. He was great as Mr. Backlund in the 90s. That was great shit. And apparently Bob Backlund's dealing with dementia and stuff like that, so that's a shame. But Bob Backlund, what a fucking character. What a goddamn character. 2000 Rumble. The hell is Bob Backlund doing here? I don't know why. I don't know why that makes me laugh, JR saying that. But I'm getting sidetracked. Backlund was going to be the handpicked guy. Billy was selling out, and that's the thing. In hindsight, I don't know if they needed to turn him. They probably should have had Backlund around for a bit, had him compete against Graham, but maybe keep it on Billy for a year. Because he won it in April of 77 and lost it in February of 78. They always make it like, it's a year and a half. It was 10 months. If they had held it, if he had held it until, say, the beginning of 79, held it for a year and a half, or almost a year and a half. Say he'd held it for 2 years, lost it in April of 79. Okay, 2-year run, he probably would have had more confidence and would have been able to do whatever, and it would have been fine. Now, who knows if he wouldn't have flamed out before that, because if you take a look at how he was looking there, he was starting to bald already, because he was 35, or he was just about to be 35 when he lost the championship. And yes, that would fuck with your mental health. That would fuck with your ability to think that you are a draw and stuff like that. And yes, having the rug pulled out from under you is ridiculous. The money was insane. Capello talked about that. But the thing is, he also ended up meeting Valerie. and ended up getting together with Valerie and leaving Madeline and stuff like that. And I really felt bad for the kids recounting that. Capella in particular, talking about how she witnessed her parents divorcing. Then Valerie mentions how he nearly OD'd in a goddamn apartment, or I think it was a New York hotel room. And after losing the title on February 20th, 1978 to a fucking super atomic drop. It wasn't always great back in the days, kids. The insecurity stayed with him from, like, his dad treating him badly. And I'm sure that fucked with him. And I'm not saying that made it okay. But Billy could have turned that right around, shoved it back in his dad's face, and just shoved it in everybody else's face. But no, he didn't. Probably because he knew deep down that even though he had the rep and he had the ability to draw people in, once the bell rang, he was the drizzling shits in the ring. I'm sorry. He was the drizzling fucking shits. He burned all his wrestling gear, especially the tie-dye stuff and stuff like that. He went back to Arizona and was doing like some business and stuff like that. And he would wrestle a little bit because Arizona had territory at that point, or at least he was doing outside shots. But he wasn't doing all that much. Gorilla Monsoon even ran a story about him dying of some form of cancer. And to an extent, Billy Graham did actually die because he went away completely. Some fans didn't know. They did skip over the Memphis stuff. I think Jim Cornette's talked about he showed up in like 78 or 79. I think it was 79. And skipped over that. He went through withdrawal symptoms on a trip to New Mexico. I'm sorry Valerie wasted her life staying with him. I'm sorry she did. Like, for all that she had to go through, I'm sorry. I'm not saying I don't have sympathy for her, but that was a bad, toxic relationship. You could just tell. Because he was having her inject him with steroids. And who knows what was in those steroids back then. That's the stuff Steve Reeves was taking and various others were taking. And no wonder they were having some goddamn issues because that stuff wasn't even formulated well. Billy changed his look. The Karate Man stuff. Look at Billy Graham in 78 when he lost the title. Yeah, he was losing his hair and he was starting to look a little bit lost. Because he was on painkillers and all that stuff and everything. And he would spiral. But take a look at him as a Karate Man 82. He looked 15 years older. Now, at that point, he was 39, because it was the end of 82. So in 83, he was 40. He didn't look great. He really didn't look great. They skipped over his Memphis stint. And Valerie apparently is not a Hulk Hogan fan, because yes, Hogan did copy Billy Graham. So did Jesse Ventura, so did many others. Dusty Rhodes took some stuff from Billy Graham. Their feud, I wish they had talked a little bit more about the feud there, but Dusty's no longer here, unfortunately. But that was a great feud. That was a great series of matches. It was 77 and 78, I believe. They skipped over the Crockett run where he actually turned back into went back to the tie-dye. Cornette even talked about how he faced off against Billy Graham, and I think it was a 6-man, but Billy Graham by that point, I mean, he was in his early 40s, his feet, or his ankle was fucked, his hip was fucked, he couldn't move. He never took the best care of himself anyway. He was on all these pills, fucked with his body, all that stuff. He went back to being tie-dye Graham in 1987. They skipped over the fact that he actually, I don't remember who it was against. I can't remember if it was Don Morocco. No, it wasn't Don Morocco. But he faced off against a guy in his comeback match, and actually his hip was mulch, and they showed him getting a hip replacement. It was pretty graphic shit for back then. And at age 44, he might as well have been 64. It just wasn't going to work. The roid usage was absolutely insane. The title loss still haunted him. And yes, I can understand that, but eventually you got to get over that shit and find a way to spin it back around. But he couldn't, because even if he hadn't lost the championship until 79, with how he was already acting, he was ODing while champion. Who's to say that he wouldn't have flamed out completely while being champion? So maybe going with Backlund wasn't the worst idea now that I think about it, and after coming up with that scenario earlier. He was fired in 88, 89, 90? maybe. It was somewhere around that, and that's when he really started going on the offense against Vince. Now, Billy Graham wasn't the only one fired, but he went on the attack in WWF and Vince. Knocked the roid usage stuff. Hogan on Arsenio Hall kind of referred to Billy Graham as an old timer. To be quite honest, at that point, 91, he was approaching 50. And the Phil Donahue show, oh boy. Valerie even said she was crying in the crowd because she could tell Billy was lying. And he was lying. Now, I don't know about the Ring Boy stuff, but as far as personally injecting Hogan, when would he have been able to interact with Hogan? Because think about it. Hogan wasn't there in 82 when he came back as a Karate Man. His hip was mulch in 1987. So when he came back and the comeback didn't end up working, I believe he managed Don Morocco and stuff like that. Unless he was doing it while he was a commentator and a manager, I'm trying to think about when he would have done that. I'm not saying that, I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's a very short window. And yeah, he was a liar. Of course he was a goddamn liar. There was talk about how he wasn't a very good father. Capello talked about that. No child support paid to Madeline. She had to go back and work at a bank. She made sure that the kids were raised right. I'm not saying that he didn't have a bit of love for his children, but he had more love for being Superstar, and he left them behind because he was being a piece of shit about it. And he basically turned into a version of his father. Maybe he never hit his kids. I mean, I doubt he did. But the abandoning actually is just as bad. So Joseph apparently had health issues like a hole in his heart and stuff like that. And he was very resentful of how his mother was treated and tossed aside and how they were tossed aside. And he had every right to be upset. He goes back to being a televangelist. Billy does. Joseph talked about legally changing his name from Graham to Maluso, I believe was his mother's maiden name. And that broke Billy. Oh, you poor roided up junkie. You poor thing. The Empty Ring special with Jake Roberts and Billy Graham and stuff like that, and kind of his way of doing a redemption thing, the religious stuff. When Jake was on his religious kick, because everybody believed that. And he talked about contracting hepatitis C and, from all the blood and the contact and stuff like that. And he did end up getting a liver transplant. A girl ended up getting in a crash. And they donated all her organs because she was legally dead. Brain dead and all that. And you think about Billy Graham having an ability to turn it around because he got that liver transplant. Was able to get in the Hall of Fame. And even before the liver transplant, when he thought he wasn't going to get it, he called up Vince to apologize. I don't think it's because he was remorseful. I think it's because he truly thought, okay, I better try to make good because this invisible, fictitious being that I believe in is going to be upset. But he does get the liver transplant, and then after that is still going on the offensive after his, Hall of Fame stuff and whatever, because he's just a shell of what he was and just a rotten human being. And I don't really feel bad saying that because, I've never suffered stuff like that. I don't plan to. I would like to think that if I had, made some bad choices like that, I'd eventually say, maybe I'm the problem. Next week, by the way, is Eddie Gilbert. That ought to be interesting. Speaking of people that had problems. Vince was forgiving. Capello and Joseph talk about they went to meet him while he was in the hospital in January 2023. And that Joseph was able to kind of make amends with him, even though he was mad and I think still harbors some resentment. He tried to let it go. Capella also tried to do that. And I did at least like that the kids tried to wrap it up nice and neatly. Again, Valerie probably should have left him way before she did. Or way before he left this earth. But that's just me. That's just my opinion. But at least the kids got to say goodbye to their dad. And that was good. And don't get me wrong, Superstar Billy Graham, one of the most influential of all time. But he flamed out and it was his own fault. The company can take it away from you. There were other territories to work. I'm not saying it would have been for the same money, but it's not like he couldn't have made something work elsewhere. I think he even worked in Dallas when it was big time wrestling. So he worked other places. It's not like Yes, it was big box office, but you're telling me he couldn't have gone back to the AWA and said, Vern, may I get a chance to do this? I'm not saying it would have worked because they've relied on good in-ring work. There were ways to make a living, and he just, for whatever reason, decided to flame the fuck out. So yeah, rest in peace, superstar Billy Graham. I mean, he's looking up at us, wondering what the hell's going on. Yes, I said up, because there ain't no damn way he's up there. He's down there in hell. So nevertheless, rest in peace, superstar. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Riplin, and I'll see you soon.